The views and opinions in this program are not those of CISA 7 or Spectrum.
I'd like to call the meeting to order. We'll start with roll call. If Sandy, you could help us with that.
Becker?
Here.
McCoy?
Here.
Shelton?
Here.
Sitnikow?
Here.
Smith?
Here.
Vandenhoevel?
Here.
Warren?
Here.
All right, all 7 board members are present. If I could have someone make a motion to go into closed session.
I can do it.
Thanks, Kristina.
I move that the board convene in closed session pursuant to Wisconsin Statute 19.85, Pren 1, Pren E, deliberating or negotiating the purchasing of public properties, the investing of public funds, or conducting other specified public business whenever competitive or bargaining reasons require closed session, more specifically to wit, potential property acquisition. The board may return to open session to vote on items discussed in closed session. The board will reconvene an open session at 6 p.m. pursuant to section 19.85(2) Wisconsin statute to consider the balance of the work session meetings. Do I have to keep reading this or do I stop there?
Nope, keep reading.
The first portion of the meeting will be an open forum. In-person public appearances are suspended until further notice. Members of the public may speak during open forum or provide written comments in accordance with the procedures posted on the district's website and state law. The board may reconvene in closed session after the conclusion of the work session meetings for such reasons noted in this posting or pursuant to a proper motion.
Second.
Second. Sandy?
Smith?
Aye.
Warren?
Aye.
Vandenhoevel?
Aye.
Sitnikow?
Aye.
Becker?
Aye.
McCoy?
Aye.
Shelton?
Aye.
All right, past 7-0. We will jump over to Google Hangouts for the closed session.
Great. See you at 6 o'clock.
I'd like to entertain a motion to move back into open session.
I can do it. I move that the board reconvene in open session pursuant to section 19.85 Pren 2 Wisconsin statutes to consider the balance of the agenda.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Sandy?
McCoy?
Aye.
Shelton?
Aye.
Becker?
Aye.
Smith?
Aye.
Sitnikow?
Aye.
Warren?
Aye.
Vandenhoevel?
Aye. Pass 7-0. All right. Before we went into closed session, we took roll call, but all 7 board members are present. We're also joined by Superintendent Michelle Langenfeld and members of her administrative staff. Sandy Heller, our board secretary, along with ICSC student representatives Luke Pisani from Southwest High School and Ian Hopp from Preble High School. I'd like to remind everyone that members of the public can view the board agenda and handouts as well as minutes from past meetings by visiting the district website at GBAPSD.org, clicking on our district and then Board of Education. On the left menu, you'll find a link to the agenda and minutes, and this link will take you to a website called Agenda Manager where all of our board agendas, minutes, and handouts for board meetings are housed. We also want to remind everyone that we still want public participation in our school board meetings. We have 2 in this virtual setting, 2 ways to do that. You can submit your comments in writing. Directions are on the website, or else by emailing boardofeducation@gbaps.org. And then you can also, there are directions there for calling in, and during a board meeting, you can call in live during board meetings. So Sandy, am I correct in that there was no submitted public comment for tonight? Okay, yep, I'm seeing you now, that's good. All right.
Eric?
Yes.
Eric, before we move on, I think we should maybe rectify something that didn't happen last week but should have. I realized this morning when I was looking at all this stuff about appreciation, staff appreciation, that we didn't pause last week and talk about the huge and lasting contribution that Brenda Warren's made to our district as our board president. And I think that was kind of a real oversight. Our meetings are so weird now that it's, you know, I don't blame anybody, but it needs to be dealt with. And so I thought I would just mention that she's given a lot of her time and expertise over the years, probably more than most of us realize and are aware of. And I think she kind of likes it that way, but I think just this once, we need to give her the recognition that she deserves and give her a heartfelt thank you for the years she spent in that role. It's often an impossible job, and that she has performed with tact and integrity, and sometimes what I would think of as sort of superhuman patience, because, you know, let's be honest, we're kind of an unruly group. So I just wanted to bring that up and just give her my heartfelt thank you. We owe her a lot, and I think it's time that we recognize that.
Yeah, thank you for that, Laura. And certainly all of that is true. I'd also like to recognize that it is officially Teacher Appreciation Week, and also tomorrow, I believe, is Teacher Appreciation Day. I think I can speak on behalf of the entire board. We're always appreciative of our teachers. This week especially, and then given the added situation with the pandemic and the work that they're doing to make sure that the needs of our kids in our district are being served. So always appreciate the teachers this week. It means a little bit more. So a lot of appreciation, but thank you for pointing that out. Yes, certainly, Brenda. Sorry that was overlooked last week.
Thank you. Thank you, Laura.
All right. So moving on, without any public comment, I think we'll get started with the teaching and learning discussion items, and I believe that'll be facilitated by Brenda.
Yep, thanks, Eric. We have our first item is a Head Start program supplement. And I don't see Sally here. Are you talking about this, John?
Yes, sure. So basically with the CARES Act, there is funding to run a Head Start summer school program, and we'd like to apply for those funds and receive confirmation from the governance body that we would be able to apply for those funds. So basically, the program is to ensure kindergarten readiness and to allow for summer school options for our Head Start students. We realize that there may be things that hinder in-person participation, but gearing kids up for summer school option, no matter what that is, gearing kids up for kindergarten readiness, that's the focus of the programming. We want to make sure that we're applying for those funds. The grant is due on May 15th, and we'd be serving approximately 198 students and families through that Head Start Summer School. And so the Head Start Summer School would start July 20th and go through August 14th. It would operate from 8:30 a.m. to 1 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And so basically it would be intended to serve the students in the Head Start programming and augment what they're able to do through that additional programming.
John?
Yes.
Can you address if the funding actually part of the funding could be used for how to get the word out about that? Any sort of marketing about that program?
Sure. And I'm not 100% sure what can be used for marketing, but I assume that that funds would be available. I can check on that and get back to the board. Ann Barsh is watching right now, so she'll be watching that question about Head Start Summer School and whether or not we could use funds for that. Generally, the purpose is pretty, or the use of funds is pretty broad, but I just want to make sure before I say one way or the other whether it could be used for that purpose.
Okay, I'm just curious if that might be something we can look into just to see if we could, if we can, I believe we should.
I believe so too. I think we want, in each of these situations, we want to make sure that we're reaching out to every family. And I think what that means in a time of closure is different than what it means in a normal time when parents could be informed through encountering people or maybe dropping off siblings at Head Start. So we want to make sure that we're reaching out as much as possible. And actually, she just texted back and said it's only for Head Start studying, so it needs to be used for the studies of Head Start. But I'm sure we could find district funding to put towards notification and getting the word out about that. I think that a media campaign or at least an opportunity to reach out would be important, and we'd be starting our reach out as well, looking at who are our current students in Head Start, as well as who is anticipated to arrive, and make sure that we're serving those students first. But again, reaching out to as many families as possible.
Thank you.
Sure, thank you.
So are these funds only if we can open our doors, or if we can't, can the funds be used in some way for, I mean, I know it's hard to do online, but anyway, just clarify that for me, please.
Sure. No, so the Head Start Summer School would be available for our students, and it would be online. But if we were able to do some things with small group in person or things of that nature, that would be explored. But we would be looking at following the same guidelines that we'd have for our regular summer school, which is trending towards having more of a virtual presence. Also related to the recruiting piece, we would be reaching out to our 4K students and thinking about those 4K students who might benefit and be eligible for Head Start, and promoting with them as well.
Okay, thanks, John.
Sure, thank you. So any additional questions about Head Start Summer School, or?
Is this something we need to vote on, or just this was just purely a discussion item?
We're requesting at a minimum a statement confirming that the governance body and policy council members available for contact give their approval for the CARES summer programming application. So we're basically asking the board for permission to apply for those funds. So a vote would be helpful.
Okay, so we can move that forward to our next meeting to take that vote, because we can't vote today.
Right.
When is the next meeting?
The 18th.
18th. So I think just tentative confirmation that there would be support would be enough. I don't know that we would need a vote, but if there were concerns about going forward for those funds, if that was made aware, or if we were made aware of that, that would be helpful. But otherwise, I think we could go ahead and write the grant.
Yeah, I'm supportive of it, and if we, if it would be helpful to write a letter or something like that to put with because we can't vote on it, I think we could certainly look at that too.
Sure.
Eric, I did talk to Sally before this was put on the agenda, because I had the same question about the May 15th, and she said it would be fine if we did it on the 18th. It would still just submit it and then submit the formal board approval after.
Okay.
John, would it be helpful for her to just know that we are generally in support, though? I mean, maybe if someone isn't, they should speak up at this point.
All right.
Thank you.
All right.
I
Thanks.
appreciate it.
And next on our agenda is the school start times task force. Yeah, we have Jeff Dickert, along with, I know a number of people here today have been on that, also been on the task force, but at this point, am I turning it over to Jeff, or are you starting, Michelle?
I was going to just say a few words, just kind of take us back. This conversation began formally at the board table in October of 2018, and now it is 2020. So began that conversation. It stemmed from conversations and requests from board members to explore this further, obviously looking at conversation that had been going on some time. And the board approved us moving forward to have CISA 7 take the lead and collaborate and facilitate those meetings. They have been going on for a very long time, and Jeff will provide us with the summary. I know that both Rhonda and Kristina served on that board, as well as Mike Stengel and many others on the district team. So I'll turn it over to you, Jeff, and I think we agreed about a half hour, and then they'll give you some questions and things. I think the document is, what, 93 pages long?
No, it's over, well, if you read every page, it'd be over 400 pages, so.
With all the back behind the back.
With all the back, right, no doubt.
All right, so welcome, Jeff.
Thank you, Michelle, and I will do my best to keep it under 30 minutes. I know that'll be a little bit of a challenge if those of you who know me. Those of you who don't, I'm Jeff Dickert. I'm the agency administrator at CISA 7. CISA 7 is an educational service agency which Green Bay is a member of. And I see Dawn. I don't think we've met personally before, but and of course the two students. But I'd just like to say hello as well to you. The task force would have loved to, under normal circumstances, would have loved to. What I normally like to do is have them make all the presentation, have different members of the task force preside and give different parts of it. But due to the format and due to the being able to get through everything tonight in this format, it's just decided that I would give everything and go forward with this. And then I think at later parts, when either the board is discussing this and so on, we can bring in task force members and have a more of a discussion if that is so what the board would like to do. Reed Welch was our chair, and Reed is watching as well. He texted me earlier, and a lot of task force members are on YouTube watching as well. They've been emailing me and so on tonight. Again, this is over 400 pages. If you printed out everything and you read through everything that we went through. So it was quite a process. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take over the shared screen here, and I'm going to kind of walk you through the process. As we go through it, there will be natural breaks that I can answer some questions. If not, we'll have a lot of time at the end to go over some things. So hang on and we'll see how we do here.
As Jeff takes over the screen, if I could just add, I think because of the magnitude of what we're about to listen to, that I know that in the brief discussions that I had both with the Vice President, Kristina Shelton, and President of the board, that at the end of this discussion, I think there's opportunity for defining next steps as to where this can go.
Okay, can everybody see my screen now, table of contents?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
So it's my understanding that all of you have received this. It's in the board e-file or agenda manager, I believe. So you should be able to follow along as we go. And I'm kind of going to click through. In some cases, I'll be a little quick. Again, I assume that you've read most of the main portions of the task force report, but I think the details are often worth the going back at a second time and taking some real good hard looks as you're going to process through this. So the first link is committee charge. Michelle talked a little bit about it, but if you look at it, this is really what we focused and grounded ourselves on. So basically, the task force's charge was to unbiasedly recommend to the Green Bay Area Public School District Board of Education school start times that coincide with research and subsidiary issues. And I'm telling you, that is easier said than done. It's a lot of work, and we spent a lot of work on it. You can see the introduction also has some of the background. Dawn, maybe for you, that would be a little more important than the rest who kind of were with us during the journey. So that's the task force, again, unbiasedly, and that is always the toughest part. When we first met, as you'll see, we had, I think, about 39, 40 people that were willing to come forward, but over time, it basically came down to about 20 members that stuck with us. Several of them thought they could move through this after 2 meetings and they'd be ready to make their recommendations, but we went through a detailed process. So committee members, I just kind of talked about that. Here's the list of who was invited. You can see widespread representation around the district from teachers, parents, students, equity reps, band, Indian or Native American culture, board members, central office, and so on. Everybody had an opportunity to partake. And then as it went on, people decided if it was worth their time and effort. And again, the schedule was grueling. It was on Wednesday nights. We tried to stay off of activity nights, and we kind of went through that process with everybody's regular life as well. This is the original schedule. If you look at the next one, section 4, as you can see, we had the Wednesday night set. That was the original schedule. We got off of it a little bit, but for the main part, that's pretty much where we stayed. The committee agendas, I'll let you look at those as yourself. Those are just agendas that were posted, and we ran through pretty much what was on there during those meetings. The task force members tracker, this is the interesting part. This does have the attendance of the members as they went through the various meetings. And of course, as you look at it, you know, some can make every meeting, some can make only parts. And it's tougher when it's every Wednesday night or the Wednesday nights that we spread out, and to stick with it through the process, because it was a, I don't know if I can even use the term mundane, but it was a very thorough process to do it unbiasedly. The first thing we started off with, then let's get to the work. First thing we started off with was the current status. And basically the current status has been in its normalcy since the 1990s. I went back and interviewed the old superintendent, Tom Joint, and we kind of looked at the original, how this came about. Basically was because in the 1990s there was a budget crisis, and one of the things that was decided upon was to switch to a more efficient dual bus route. Before that, you had K-12 kids riding together, and since then you have not. And basically, no matter what's happened, whether it's federal, the lunch programs, influencers, everybody's tinkered with the system, but basically it stayed approximately the same for 25 years. So let's move on then to the research. We spent a lot of time going through the research, and as the committee put it together, we spent times kind of putting it into 3 formats. They're not pure as can be formats, but really we kind of put it into sleep studies, school start times research, and then other evidence, a potpourri of things that other places are doing, or other evidence, or things that even task force members went out and found, and then we put them into these categories. What we did in each one is tried to make a summary, and then basically linked to all of the research. And in each one of the researches, you can see kind of a little synopsis before you click in of what you're going to find there. And as the research talked, I think one of the big things in the first one is kind of the optimal sleep times for ages 3 to 5, 6 to 12, and then teenagers. And I think the original discussion and the original thought process was that pretty much high school kids are not getting the appropriate amount of sleep, and we see that as we went through the research. And of course, middle school is starting to fall into that, and then the discussion about the elementary as well. But there didn't seem in the original format the biggest concern about the elementary kids at this point. So as we went through all that, we got through that part, and then we started doing sleep study research review, and we went through and each one's listed. And again, you can click and follow all the way from high school times associated to school start times to near exhaustive sleep guide for parents. I mean, we looked at just about everything we could find. Then the next section is we started talking about school start times. We did some reviewing for you so that you can take some review before you're going to go into it heavily. And it talked about health as well and some impulses and other things that happen with proper sleep and better behavior and some other things. And then we just started listing all the different things for like later school start times, improved grades, mood and safety, and other things recommended by the Academy of Pediatrics and so on. So it gives you a lot of evidence you can go through and you can look at upon your leisure. And then the last thing we noted was other evidence. And, you know, all the way from like the California legislation, it said, you know, decisions best handled locally, kids need more sleep, transportation, and can it be a cost barrier to change? There's a lot of things out there. Education Week. So we just linked all the things that were out there. Even some things where Chicago schools did some changes basically due to transportation costs. In a lot of places where we originally saw change when this, I'd call it research was in its infancy, really came about because of something other than changing for the research. And a lot of times it was busing, saving money, those kinds of things. So crisis oftentimes helped in places changing. So there's a lot of stuff here and a lot of things with the TED Talk as well for you to go through and of course study the research and go through it as we did as a committee. So that's where all the research is. It's embedded and there's plenty for each one of you to take a look at that. All right, I'm going to move on then to subsidiary issues. So as we noted in the title about, you know, following the research, the next part that we really spend time is the subsidiary issues. These are the things that will get people bogged down, will get people to come out of the woodwork and make opinions and give you opinions based on the various things that affect them, their family, their children, their schedules, the teachers, everybody in the building, custodians, and so on. So we went through it and kind of gave a subsidiary issue summary of what we did and coordination of school start and end times. We did some summary, and then we started getting really right into it. And you know as well as I do that there's big players in making any change, and some seem bigger than others, and none may be bigger than co-curricular activities. It's one of the ones there. DPI, required minutes of instruction. We have a federal after-school program. If you run too late, how does that affect that? How does that affect the family picking up their kids? If you start making decisions, where does food service fall in? How will their time shift? How will that affect finding quality staff to work? The parent schedule, you know, you're running all over the place, getting kids all over, daycare, after school, before school programs. The sibling schedule, how does it fit? How does it fit for families? Currently, it works pretty well that the high school students can watch elementary at certain times of the day. How does that work well? Student work, if we end early currently and we move to a later time, how's that going to affect student work? We noticed in Chicago that if you looked at that study, they went back and reversed it basically on the input a year later from parents really working the system to note that the student work was the #1 reason that their system didn't work. So I'm just telling you, everything's different, but this is the stuff we talked about. Teacher contract, how does that work? Tradition, traffic congestion. Here's the other big dog, busing. How does transportation gonna work if you start scrunching the times together depending on your rotational basis of your current bus route? And then what's it gonna cost you? And then we had various miscellaneous comments and so on. And then we put a link, which is in this report, it's the next part, but we just put a link here too that you can click on, and it takes you to what we would call the raw data. And that's actually in this next section right here, subsidiary issues. What we wanted to do is give to you how the discussion went, how people discussed different things and different issues, and bell schedules and all kinds of things. So we did not want to, when we summarize things, we did not want to totally put words in people's mouths that you wouldn't have access to. So we really tried to stay as transparent and open on the discussions and the data so that you, as a board, or anybody else that you have, administration or others assigned to look into this later, they have all of the stuff we went through. In some cases, then you can refer to it and you may not have to go through all of that again. Even like from the AD talking about, start times at the middle school, start times at the high school for spring sports. That's always one of the issues. Spring sports, if we heard that one time, we heard that a lot of times. Spring sports. But you get the idea. Transportation, parent schedules. Parents were really, boisterous and really brought us to task when we started getting to schedules and, the parent schedule and how you follow things and so on. And here's some issues and impact on the days and the days for the kids and things like that. So you get all of that input in this document. So I want you to understand, while we summarized, we also gave you the raw points and the raw data that we worked with and worked through this with the task force. All right, now, speaking of raw data, we're gonna move to the summaries of the surveys. Now, this survey, if you print this out, I don't know, I sent it to Sandra and we printed it out, and I can't remember if it's, maybe it might be up to 100 pages itself. But what we were very happy when we went to the surveys at the time we did. We're really happy with the participation rate. We got about 2,800 parents reply, over 2,000 staff members, over 3,000 students. So we were really happy of the statistical significance of the data that we received. And what we did for you then is we broke it down into 3 basically survey points. And the first one would be the parents. And if you click on that link, it'll take you right to the parent survey. And I think it's important to understand, as we asked and sent this out, we also had to always come back to this and take a look at where is your support going to be as you move start times. And you may, as a board, want to take a good hard look at all this data. But again, later on when we get to the final recommendations, you may want to run some of your own surveys. I'm just telling you, we were very pleased with the Green Bay Public Schools response in helping us, but also the response of the parents, students, and staff in giving us some guidance on this as well. So as you look at the parent survey and we come down the list, and I know this gets a little hard for you to see on my computer and seeing it again, but basically it just breaks down in this conglomerate. And this is a little kind of interesting to watch. I'm going to kind of run down a little further. But if you looked at the total, you'd say, well, it seems like most of the parents think the kids, over half, are doing pretty well and getting a pretty good night's sleep. And so we're going to kind of come back to that in a second. But this chart right here talks about the elementary school parents, the middle school parents, high school parents, and then the specialty school parents. But you can see when you go into the report, you can see that in the elementary, there's standard times of 8, 8:30, and 9 o'clock, some pretty solid support. You look in the middle school, this is our regular starting time right here, but we move up and then we're getting good, strong 8 o'clock and some good, strong 8:30 at the middle school, and it wanes a little, or 8:30, 8:15, 8:30, but the same support as you would get for the earlier starting times. Notice at the high school, here's our 7:30 starting time, 7:45, 8 o'clock gets the biggest bump, but still good solid support for 8:15 and 8:30 comparatively. Do note that once you get and start sliding back a little further, you lose your support. Excuse me. So when you get to elementary, though, the reason I want to just go a little further, notice the skew on the elementary parents feeling really confident that their kids are getting a really sufficient night's sleep. So those were probably skewing a little in our total of the K-12 parents. But you can see then again in a bigger chart, this is what they would support. So you can kind of see that. You can always go back to that. Notice the middle school, here's their sleep chart, a little bit about 50-50 now. We start moving 50-50, about half feeling, yeah, my kids are getting a pretty decent night's sleep, about half saying no, they're not really getting sufficient sleep. And then notice their support in a larger chart here is right here. A very good support, 8 o'clock, 8:15, 8:30. It starts to be about the same as the 7:45 and the 7:30. Anything pushing back, you're starting to lose support. So keep that in mind. But let's go to high school. So as the high school, by the way, Preble parents, the largest school had the largest response. But notice now we're getting to about 35% say they're getting sufficient night's sleep. But notice now we've got almost 2/3 saying no, they're not. So you can see, even though the skewing of the total probably being really helped by the elementary parents, when you break the data down, and you can do this yourself as you go through this, there's plenty of data to be broken down. And then here's the parents. Again, at the high school, some good strong support, 8. You've got just about close support if you make any movement from 7:30 to 8:30. Going any deeper, you're losing support. All right, let's go to, hang on, let me get this one back up again. I'm going to spend some time real quick on the staff survey. Okay, the staff overall survey. Now, this is one of those where you can see we got about half of the teachers were about the half of the staff. And we got over 2,000 responses, 1,000 teachers. This is basically where their support ran. Elementary school, you can look at, and we'll get to some of those charts there. But basically 8 and 8:30, a little more for the later, not so much for the earlier at 7:30. You start getting more of your middle school and high school staff really liking starting school earlier. They've probably gotten in their routines. And even though there's strong support here at 8, starts to wean a little bit. You can see the 8:30. As we talked with the same thing over here at the high school, some of these people, if and when, and if you ever look at a 0 hour, which some of the other high schools that moved their start times back had for sport athletes, extracurricular, and kids who worked, you're going to have plenty of volunteers to run a 0 hour, because I think you got a lot of staff that likes that early morning. But you can sit in here and now you can go, and I'm not going to go all the way through it, but you can break down, here's the elementary teachers, here's their preference. So it does break it down by teachers and elementary, high school teachers, and eventually you'll get to support staff, administration, and all of the other different categories. So that's something you can take your time to go through as well. And then the student one, a lot of great information back from the kids. And, you know, basically 75% of the kids that responded were from the high school. I think the middle school, if we had to do it again, we'd probably go in and have it done in maybe their social studies class or history or whatever they call theirs now, social science, and have them run through that. We'd probably get a better response. But really, this just takes it down to the whole total student response. But then you can get to the middle school summary and the high school summary, and you can see that, you know, looking at the high school, you got good, strong support at 8 o'clock. You got good, strong support for 8:30 and to 7:30, but note anything less than that, you start losing your support amongst the high school kids. Somehow we didn't get this all the way up, but I think if you go down to like 177 or slide one side, what are the odds I'm going to find it here and it'll load fast enough? But here are the high school kids, well, the Southwest. But if you keep going through it, you'll see that the high school kids really talk in a lot of time of when they go to bed and when they actually, you know, get some sleep times. Here's West and Preble and them. You'll see a lot of your kids are going to bed later and later. So that's in there. I think, you know, it's something you can take a look at, and it's something that you'll need to wrestle with when you're going to go to your start times. The committee wrestled with it, looked at it, and that really informed them to what they came to in the task force recommendation. Due to time here, I'm going to kind of just really skip over the input sessions of the stakeholders, just that it's there. I would say we were heartfully disappointed in the staff input. If we had to do it again, I'm sure you're going to do something before you make some selections. I would probably just run that back out again. We just didn't get a lot of good staff interaction, so I'm going to skip that. But we were really proud of the parent feedback using the superintendent's parent ad hoc committee. And then, of course, the students, we got some great feedback from using the high school student council. You got some great kids, and they do great work. And I'm just going to let you tell you, they've got great ideas and great comments. So you can take a look at that and go through that. A lot of the subsidiary issues in the kids' comments came through loud and clear. They really were very interested in that. So what I'm going to do then is get to the task force recommendation, and I'm going to spend a little more time on that. So we had 14 face-to-face meetings, and we studied over 80 research documents and 20 subsidiary issues and over 8,000 survey responses of students, staff, and parents. And that's really what you saw in the crux of this task force report. The task force makes the following 2 scenarios as their recommendations. We would have loved to come with 1, but after several attempts of the facilitator, which was myself, and Aaron Melchesky, one of my executive assistants, directors, We used a couple of methods that Shirley usually work to get people to move. And for those of you that were there, you know, we kind of came down to 2 groups, and basically that's where we ended. And we could have went another 3 months and nobody really was going to make any movement. So we decided that as a task force, we'll leave the school board with some additional work as they meet with the stakeholders and group. But the task force was really adamant about moving both options forward and then laying that in to you folks, and then you can start your work from that. So let's take a look at scenario A. So in scenario A, the high school would be moved back roughly 40 minutes to an 8:10 starting time, and about a 3:40. Now this is using approximate current status time, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute or two. The middle school would be a little more of a floater depending on bus schedule. It might be an 8:15 to 3:25, but it might be an 8:20 to 3:25. But at this point, we tried to put it there to kind of force the transportation hand and see how that would work. And then basically, you would be moving all of the elementary, which you have kind of all over the board, but you have some starting at 7:57, 8:27, 8:57, and we moved them into 2 groups, an 8 o'clock start time and a 9 o'clock start time. And then their days would basically stay the same and just end according to the standard schedule they have now. Now, in those thoughts, the major comment that always came out in the scenario A is it's busing friendlier. There's other schedules that are truly bus friendly, total bus friendly, but this is a bus friendlier schedule, but still has some challenges. And in this, you would be running, basically our recommendation would be running morning bus routes. And the first bus routes you would run would be the elementary A group and the middle schoolers together. And then the middle schoolers and the high schoolers. And the middle schoolers in this scenario would kind of be the ones that would balance out those routes. So the middle schoolers would be, you know, kind of be the wild card that would balance the different routes and being delivered. In some cases, the middle schools aren't as close to the high schools as in some of your cases. So you may be moving them around. And then there'd just be a second bus route, which would just be all the elementary B students being picked up. In the afternoon, then, you'd have your first routes would be the elementary A students. They would get out and off they'd go. And then there'd be a swing around, and the second routes, again, this time would be the elementary B groups riding home with middle schoolers, and then middle school and high school. So again, your middle school routes or your middle school kids would be that balancer between your routing. And so that would kind of be how the system. Now, is that going to be easy? No. Jeremy Wildenberg, your transportation director, was with us, a great board or great task force member, and he knows that this will be a challenge. The other thing they noted was the end times are friendlier to after-school co-curriculars. They're probably friendlier to kids who have to work after school. That was just kind of noted in this time. One of the things was also noted, it probably doesn't meet, if you read through the research, adjusting later times for high school, but adding a potential of 40 minutes to a teenager's sleep cycle was with this being busser friendly and co-curricular friendlier, was really the incentive of this group. All right, so I'm just going to kind of leave it there and move to scenario B. Now, scenario B, that group is looking at truly starting high school at 8:30 and moving that back. And then the end time with the current setup would be 4 o'clock. The middle school would also start roughly in the middle, about at 8:15, and end about 3:25. And there may be some movement again there according to bus scheduling. But again, you notice the elementary would stay tight in that same elementary group A and that same elementary group B. Task force thoughts of scenario B, they really liked how it honored the sleep research for high school students. And middle school still got plenty of sleep, and the elementary were getting it, no matter if you were starting at 7:57 in your old system or 8:57 in your old system. So we're pretty happy with that. And that's really the main driver of how this group really came to this scenario. Task force thoughts also, if you looked at your bus routes, a little changing there a little bit, but not much. But really, it's going to make it a transportation challenge. That's all we're going to say, transportation challenge. So that'll work. Same way we're going to do it the other way. We'll just have to figure it out. End times will be, in some cases, and again, we put the mainly spring sports, a challenge to after-school co-curriculars. With some of the track meets and some of the things that start earlier in the spring, in a normal spring, let's put it that way, in a normal spring, those will be some challenges. And to get people out there to work the events and other things that was brought forward. This scenario, this schedule is real friendly to a 0 hour for students and staff. And we've talked about it. My cohort Aaron and I even visited Oshkosh, and I think there's a lot of places you can visit to look at how you can do a 0 hour for students that like that, especially your spring sports students. Oshkosh, I think, has a understanding that all spring sports students do 0 hour, but that also means you need to have quality courses that are core courses during that 0 hour. And so it really works out well. Oshkosh has plenty of teachers that want to volunteer because then they get done earlier during the day. But that's really something that would fit in with this scenario, and to that group, that was a big plus also looking at it. You can see later here the elementary starting times. You can see we're just putting them either in an 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock category based on where they were. And the wild cards were, I think we got some of that Webster and another wild card going back or forth to balance the routes. Initially, I think we had another one in here. Oh, Eisenhower. But the night we posted this and so on, Jeremy, your transportation guy, said that'll probably be 9 o'clock. I've already done the math on the students and so on. We'd need them at 9 o'clock. So, but we've left it in there for a little buffer. Now, here's a couple of things we wanted to put in, and I think this is well worth you folks taking consideration about this. So I mentioned the 8 or 9 there with the elementary start times, but the other ancillary recommendations. Once a start times and end time schedule is decided, we would really recommend that all additional minutes placed on the schedule for snow days or other school closing events to meet DPI minutes should always be added to the end of the day. The start time should remain the same to honor the sleep times, because once you start monkeying with 3 minutes, it's pretty easy to get to 6, pretty soon it gets to 10, and things start sliding. So if you're going to add minutes, we really, really recommend you keep that start time schedule the way it is for family schedules. We believe and we think that you might recommend to administration and to all of the high school administration and staff that they should study the block and trimester schedule of East High School for possible implementation at other Green Bay area high schools. We think that if you look and study that, some of it might be you go to a block schedule. Some of it might be you stay with your current 8-period days but go to a trimester. Or some of it may be we go to block and trimester like East. But we've seen a lot of really, really good early statistics coming out of East. And I know Lori, the high school principal there, would be happy to do some sharing with all of the administration on that. But one of the things we did notice, and this will be interesting when you get all the staff together and you get administration, you get representation, is in your current high school schedule, you may be able to go later and still end back earlier you need to take a hard look at your lunchtime, and is it still merited to a 55-minute lunch? And is that something the high school needs to do when East really has boiled that down to 30 minutes? And so that's something you're going to need to look at and talk about. And yet, so that may in the end take care of two birds, one stone. All right, elementary administration staff, we went on and continued. They need to talk about their instructional time. There was a time when we were adding minutes to all the schedules to really make it that you would never have to have a snow day. But we kind of backed off on that and said, well, that's something else that can be done later. But during that conversation, elementary instructional time came up a lot. And I think that's something you're going to need to want to go back and take a look at and really study based on your curriculum and based on test scores and based on other things. And then we said the same thing about the middle school. We know that their instructional time has always been based on how they fit into the busing schedule. Maybe we need to look at that as how do they fit into what should be true middle school instruction, true middle school setup. If you're really running a middle school, look at how middle schools run versus mini junior highs. And so that's something I think would be great as you're looking at all of this. Last but not least, through this timeline, and of course, unbeknownst to you, but I was sick for over a month and so on. So there's some delay in getting this to you, but we would say maybe that may behoove you to take a good look at how you want to do this, having 2 recommendations versus 1. Not sure, but now with the pandemic coming through and people forgetting what their real start times and end times were and getting used to the home schedule, who knows, maybe this might be the time to take a look at it as well. So that was the recommendations as we went through it. I know you've all read it. Most people always went to that page first. And then we just, because we didn't have a minority report. Generally, when I do task force and do this kind of work, we usually get like a 85, 90% agreement on one. And then I always give the 10%ers a chance to write a minority report, right? We want you to know what the others were thinking. Well, in this case, we've got 2 groups and they've really gotten their say and they've gotten their information out. So what I just did is offered to every task force member an opportunity for 250 words or less. And just in this case, I think we had 4 people from the task force comment. And so we just put it in there for you as well. So that's kind of the 300-page total report boiled down into, and I'm sorry, Michelle, a little longer than 30 minutes, but that's the best I could do. Now I'm kind of open for questions, or if I've taken my time, I can come back at another board meeting. And after you've read through, we can come back with other people as well and go through this total report, whatever your wish is.
Yeah, well, I think with hundreds and hundreds of pages and hours of work, one of the reasons that you cited already, Jeff, is that conversation around what's our current reality and is there opportunity here? There's been such extraordinary work done here, and is it an opportunity now to take next steps forward? So one of the things that I would hope coming from board members tonight would be kind of a framing out of what are those next steps. And I know that we've had a very high level discussion, Kristina and Eric and I have, and obviously, I'll stop now, but we're just waiting for next step directions because there's a great deal to absorb and consider.
Yeah, so obviously a lot here, a lot to consider. I was able to page through some of it. Appreciate you going through it, Jeff, and sharing a little bit more about the process. I think there certainly is an opportunity to make some movement here, but I also don't think that that's something we're going to take on here tonight. So sort of what we talked about, Kristina and Michelle and I, was perhaps forming a smaller working group. Maybe some board members and any staff, Michelle's team, to get together and bring something back to the board, a smaller group that can, help us to understand how this might really influence us. Can we look more into the cost of some of these changes? And then, still this summer, maybe if we gave them a July deadline and just say, hey, come back to us in July and let us know, what does this really mean, or to see if we can break it down to one recommendation or the other. And we also recognize that our transportation director, Jeremy, who's been so pivotal in all of this work, is leaving us, is relocating. And so want to take advantage of him while he's here and his expertise to see if we can help break this down a little further.
Can I add to that, Eric? I think that's a great point that you make about Jeremy, and that it's important that we have his, his feedback on both scenarios. So if something happens where maybe we're not allowed to have him be part of it, or we don't have him for that long, or however that works, that we have that on record so we can actually use that, because he was at, I believe, probably almost every meeting, and he gave a lot of really important critical feedback that is going to make a big difference in how we roll this out, if we roll this out. So I'm hoping that we can have that, with us in order to move forward.
Yeah, regardless of where this goes next, I think in timing, that I've had the conversation with Pete, who is a supervisor, that we would want to continue that conversation for the very reasons you cited, Rhonda, with Jeremy.
Yeah, so when I talked to Eric this week, and we were sort of brainstorming with Michelle about where this would go, to Eric's point, I think what I would be looking for at this point is, based on what everyone has seen, as you were looking at these documents and in Jeff's presentation tonight, is there any glaring issues, concerns, pieces of bodies of evidence that you would be looking for to help you make a better decision to sort of move this forward? I think we could really spin our wheels getting into the details and into the weeds in this, and then it never really goes anywhere. And I think that's sort of a concern, is ensuring that, where does this go? Do we have a plan? And is that plan well informed by not just the board, but by the group that built this project? I mean, this is such an incredible amount of work that has gone into this. So that's kind of where the suggestion came, is, is there a smaller working group that takes this research, works with the board and district admin, and basically comes back and says, here's what you've needed, here's where our suggestions go, and this is sort of a plan to implement the next phase. So if anybody has anything specific, one of the things that did come up was doing a cost analysis of the transportation for each of the options, was one of the first things that we thought of.
Yeah, I mean, just to jump on, sort of what I see is the research is conclusive, right? I mean, that especially those high school kids need more sleep. The survey results from really all groups generally say that people would be supportive of adjusting it, maybe to a certain point, but that was sort of all clear. And so I think what we need now, whether it be that cost analysis, what are the underlying things that we might not be thinking about that we need to make sure, if we're going to make this decision based upon everything that we're seeing, making sure that we know everything we need to know. So that working group can help. And maybe they don't have it done by July, and they come back to us in July and say, here's what we've done, here's what we know, and we need more time. That's a possibility, but we don't want to push it off too far down the road.
I have a question about this kind of relates to other committee meetings, but if there's a work group that's put into play, obviously this will be posted, correct? And would we be able to actually have these meetings? Because That's important to know. If we're going to have a work group, our committee meetings seem to have been canceled for some reason. So I'm wondering about how that looks and how that plays moving forward. I know you're kind of setting a timeline, and I think that's important to do. But I think what's also important is that we make some sort of clarification around what that looks like as far as our work group meetings will be.
Good point.
And if
Would
we
those
can
meetings
have them.
Would those meetings need to be posted if it was just 2 board members and some staff working through some logistics?
But that's literally what our committee meetings are. And for some reason, those are being canceled. So I'd like someone to clarify that about why that's happening, how we could be doing this work group. Just
I don't
something
think
that's
I
on my
can
mind.
comment. I don't think I can comment on why they were canceled. I think I don't have the information for that because I'm not the leaders of those work groups. But yes, Eric, because they are committees that are designated by the school board in accordance with the Krieger decision, the Supreme Court Krieger decision, they must be posted and they must be broadcasted live because they are public meetings. So as we're working in this virtual world, they will need to be broadcasted just like we are for the school board meeting. But with respect to the cancellation, I believe we had new committee assignments, and they were, other than that, I can't speak to that.
And hopefully, I don't, but maybe we'll have the ability to meet in person, and we don't have, we can post them and they can be public meetings versus having to do them virtually. And if that means that first meeting isn't until June, then we just push that back. Because I agree, it's not convenient, but hopefully we'll be able to have a little bit more flexibility in that.
So do you see us choosing then who's in the committee and maybe just some sort of a timeline as well as how to move forward? Is that what we should do tonight?
Yeah, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but Pete and or Jeremy, I would recommend Kristina and Rhonda, since you've been, I think, the most involved to this point, continuing that work. It doesn't make sense for someone new to jump into that conversation. And then anyone else at the recommendation of Pete and or Michelle, sort of what I'm thinking now, but if anyone else has any other suggestions.
Can I just clarify? I'm sorry. I thought I was answering Rhonda's question with respect to the work groups. And the work groups are designated by policy, and under the Krieger decision, those have to be posted and streamed. If we're talking about, so like the teaching and learning work group, the organizational support. If we're talking about this ad hoc group, while we always have posted these sorts of committees, such as the secondary task force, the boundary committee, those sorts of things we have posted and we have run as an open meeting for the public. I would not say that the Krieger decision applies to that particular committee. But I wanted to clarify that because we were talking about 2 different things here.
Melissa, because you're saying it's an ad hoc. That's
correct. And it's whether there's a whole number of factors, Kristina. So Krieger may or may not apply. I would have to analyze that. But Rhonda brought up the work groups, and my comment was specific to the work groups.
Okay.
I would also comment, if you don't mind, that the monitoring report work group was canceled because we have postponed monitoring reports until we return to normal due to the more time-sensitive issues that are brought forward. So that's why the monitoring report group was canceled today.
Okay, and I appreciate that explanation because it wasn't really laid out. So thank you.
Sure, and I know it's been difficult for you to be able to make those meetings, Rhonda, and we'd want to work around schedules that work for all committee work group members to be able to make it so that all could participate if desired. Thanks.
Well, I'm unemployed now, so I can make any meeting you want me to be at.
So, Melissa, just to clarify, if it was just Pete and Jeremy and Kristina and Rhonda who wanted to get together and talk about some of this, that wouldn't have to be a posted meeting. It could, but it doesn't have to be.
If this was like pre-planning, trying to figure out what our how we're going to put this together, that sort of thing, that would probably not have to be a posted meeting. If it was the actual board designated, here's where we want this group of individuals, and then this is going to feed into board action, that under the Krieger decision may have to be a posted meeting.
Well, we don't need to get into that too much today. I think we can figure that out legally if we sort of identify, is everyone comfortable with Kristina and Rhonda continuing? And then obviously Jeremy and Pete and anyone else, Michelle, that you want to designate as being sort of this core group.
Can I just jump in real quick? Because I just want to offer this to any other board member. If this is something that you want to step into, I've been a part of it, but you clearly can look at the research at the project and step in. So if there's someone else that wants to be, I'm happy to continue it. But I also recognize like some of us might be better at systems thinking and kind of want to be a part of it. So happy to include you or step back. And I also wanted to ask Jeff if what we're talking about, sort of next steps, does that sort of resonate you from, I mean, because you've led this, does that kind of seem like a logical next step from your perspective?
Yeah, I think with the massive amount of stuff there, I think you're going to have to take some step backs, which I think you're going to do, and then you're going to talk about probably what Eric said. The research pretty solid. If you look at a couple scenarios that we put forward and you settle on one, you really do need to know where your subsidiary issues sit, and busing is number one. So I think that would probably help you gauge then how quickly or how long of a process you're going to need to make a rational decision based on that.
Thank you.
Could we also have a representation on that in that group from GBA? I would like to make sure that happens, because I'm sure that their membership has a lot to say about this.
It's a good idea.
And actually, thanks for bringing that up, Laura, because I wrote a note about that and I forgot to bring that up. Jeff, can you just give a quick overview of how GBEA was included in the process overall, just to let everyone know that their voice wasn't integrated?
So I'm assuming Green Bay Association for Teachers?
Yeah, their teacher union.
Okay. All right, just want to make sure as GBA is right. Yeah, they had several representatives, and I know Joel McCabe was one of the representatives actually on our sheet lined up as the teacher union rep. But we had teachers and members and them all as part of the process. So Joel is very good. Unfortunately, I think towards the end, we butted up against his schedule on the music and the other things going on. So Wednesday nights may not have been the best, but they were highly represented throughout the process through this.
Jeff, I just had a couple questions. Can you tell me, I know the memorandum of understanding that we saw when we made our agreement with CISA 7. I remember that, but can you tell me in the end what the final cost of this was?
You know, I really can't. I'd have to look it up. I can get it to you. I know we have some costs that you took over, and then we know the survey didn't cost us nearly as much as we originally thought, because we were able to get, so I know the cost, boy, I want to say run somewhere between $15,000 and $20,000. It'll be total.
Okay. Can we get a final bill on that pretty soon?
Yeah, we want to do that, but we just want to make sure that you've accepted the task force report before we'd ever bill a member.
No, I understand. Also, the attendance chart, is that accurate?
Oh, we thought it was pretty accurate, yes.
Okay. So my concern about that is that this project isn't really like a lot of the work that comes to our board, and that it originated not from staff but from the board. And I believe that this was spearheaded by Rhonda and Kristina. So it's, I think it's really important when we request this sort of work that when we're asking department heads and school principals and teachers to show up at meetings in the evening, that we have absolutely rock solid attendance by board members. And if we're going to talk about having another work group, we have task force and committees and variety of meetings that district staff have to attend. I would just like to ask my fellow board members going forward, if you are overcommitted, if you can't fulfill the commitment you made, then call another board member so that we have proper representation at these meetings. Because I can promise you that people notice this, because I've gotten feedback about that from people, and I just think that's really, it sends a bad message. So
I'm sorry, Laura, can you clarify what you mean? Because I know I missed a bunch in the summer because of my son's baseball, and Rhonda and I coordinated that because she was going to those. And then she and I would talk afterwards, and I was working on this away from the meeting. So are you trying to say that because we weren't there at every, I'm not sure what you're trying to get at.
That's exactly what I'm getting at. I got feedback from people saying, well, why aren't board members at these meetings? And there were, from what I could tell, if the chart is accurate, there were 4 meetings that there was no board representation, and people, principals and district department heads were there, and that is something that I think that we should be sensitive about. So yeah, if you can't make a meeting, if you're overcommitted, then let someone know, and see if if we can find someone else to come. I think that can be easily done.
Is there a reason why you didn't share that feedback with us?
I'll tell you that it didn't really occur to me until I saw that chart, which I got on Friday. So,
but that chart was actually published months ago and available months ago.
I don't remember seeing that months ago. Sorry, I saw it on Friday.
And I understand that, but what I'm saying is that information was public a long time ago. So.
And now I'm bringing it up at this meeting because we're talking about additional work groups, and I think it's relevant going forward.
Okay, so, and I hear that, but I guess what's important to know is if somebody is so inclined to discuss that without being interested in the reasons why, I would hope moving forward that they would be able to reach out to the specific person and ask them.
I can't speak for them. I just can speak for myself and the feedback
I'm
I
asking you to
received.
speak for them. I'm asking you to tell whoever this is that was concerned about that my cell phone, unlike yours, is on the website. So I'm available anytime.
That has nothing to do with attendance at these meetings.
Do you want to talk about the attendance? Because I think what's interesting is that it seems that you're trying to paint as if we weren't there, and we were there whenever we could be there, and I think we were there quite a bit. So, I mean, do you want to talk about numbers?
Sure, go ahead and talk about numbers.
But this seems very petty.
I don't know if the other people would perceive it that way.
I don't know who these other people are. It's very anecdotal, and I don't understand what the point is.
Sorry, I was on mute. Let's move on. The question from Kristina was, does anyone want to take her place on this committee if we have 2 board members? And it doesn't seem like anybody.
I'm happy to continue moving forward with this
All
project.
right, thank you. So
Rhonda
we'll go
and I have
forward.
been committed to it, and we'll continue going forward.
All right, we'll go forward with that. We're meeting with Michelle on Wednesday. We'll just confirm who's all there. And again, if the first meeting isn't until June, we'll take it from there. So
Can I just ask one follow-up? Is there anything outstanding from any of my fellow board members that there is an immediate question or need that you want the committee, this work group, this next step to be considering? Anything right now?
I have one. I didn't see, I looked through all the surveys and don't recall seeing a question about whether the parents were comfortable having middle school kids either with elementary or with high school kids on the bus. And I think that that's, we've had other times when we've had options on the table, not necessarily busing, but school combinations where we've mixed kids, and we've got a lot of feedback from that the parents don't like that. So I think that I don't see it in the report, but I do think that that's something that needs to be, I'm not saying it's going to prevent us from doing this, but it'll be something that'll need to be considered and then also communicated and all of those kinds of things moving forward. And I also agree with the evaluation of the transportation costs. From what I see, it looks like they're probably pretty similar, except the timing of them, the logistics of getting the buses scheduled is more complicated with that, with the scenario B. But that was the one thing that I think is, otherwise I thought I read through not all 400 pages, but a lot of them. And it was just very interesting. Obviously a lot of hard work went into this and a lot of good things to consider, and obviously not an easy, moving forward, this is going to continue to be a challenging thing, but something I think that's really worthwhile continuing forward with.
So Brenda, can I touch on what you asked about the middle school and elementary school kids being together on the bus?
Yeah.
I remember Jeremy, when I was attending these meetings this summer, I remember Jeremy actually specifically discussing that point you're making. That's why I think it's really important that we have him, I guess, get something down on paper, or just to have his thoughts, his feedback, everything that he contributed was really valuable. And on that topic, we did have discussion, and I think it's important that we would be able to put that somewhere we would have it so we could answer to that.
Yeah,
not just
and
to the
he
board, but
included
to the public as well.
He included a little bit of that, I think, in his response in the very last section. But you're right. I think I agree. We need to really tap his brain a lot before he leaves, so that we don't lose any of the work that he's done so far.
In the event, if I could just, Eric, or who's facilitating, in the event that he were to take, in the move, obviously, we've had some preliminary conversations. Depending upon what he ends up doing, he could avail himself, from what I understand. So we do have his expertise. We're not losing him. He's moving closer to family, but being able to tap him on the shoulder is something that he has already said he would be available. And I assume, Jeff, you also would be, as we think forward, what that would look like if we have questions and whatnot too. So
yes, absolutely.
So I wrote down your comments, Brenda, and Eric, if this is okay with you, I will spearhead this moving forward next. So I'll sort of round up the group and come up with a next steps action plan for everyone. Is that good for everyone? Okay. And I do want to get back to oh, sorry, Andrew, go ahead.
Okay, so so I guess I just want to say that, if I wasn't sure if I was going to do this or not, but if we're really going to talk about attendance, I made a big deal in this committee about, and I remember going back and asking it to be corrected to make sure that there would be a minimum of one student per each high school on this committee. And there were 2 students who attended most of them, and there were 3 students who attended either 1 or 0. And I don't want to see that ever again with a committee of this importance, that we have 1 or 0, because if there were students who weren't going to go, other students could have been found who would have loved to go. As far as the board member, for one, I honestly didn't know. I mean, yes, Noah was one of the reps. I didn't know that there was an opportunity, and maybe there is, maybe there isn't. And if going forward I know about this, I didn't know if it was seats for 2 specific board members, and if that caused any legal issues, if there was swapping out that could have been I think, I know walking quorums there's case law about them. I think it's kind of a goofy area, but it's determined. I didn't know if that was something I could even offer. So if going forward, certainly if there's a time that we just need, if there's 2 board members on a committee and subbing is allowed, please feel free to let me know if a sub is needed for a committee, but we should get some clarification probably to make sure that that's allowed. But if it's allowed, count me in.
Thanks for bringing that up, Andrew, because actually as you were talking, I was remembering that for me last summer, whenever I took the job at the YW, it was hard for me to get there on Wednesdays. And I remember emailing Brenda and saying, it's hard for me to get there. Would somebody else be able to go? And getting guidance from Brenda. And I can't remember if this was in an email from you, Brenda, or not, saying, go when you can. It would be very difficult for someone to step into this now because it's so far along. So just keep, coordinate with Rhonda and go when you can. So that is what we did. This was a weekly meeting that was very time intensive, and it was impossible for a lot of people, especially with summer schedules, to get to everything. And I feel like the board did a fantastic job being present and being a part of this, and I'm really proud of our work. And I think any attempts to discredit that work is really frustrating and unfortunate. So I'm excited about where it's going to head forward. I am really appreciative of our district staff that were just, it was really hard. Like, the conversations were really challenging, and the staff really pushed on each other. I thought it was a great display of critical conversation. Because, you would be arguing a point, and then on 10 seconds later, you would be arguing a different point because it was so complicated. So I was really honored to be a part of this, and I'm excited about where it goes next. So I'll follow up with you. But to your point, Andrew, that was the guidance that I had gotten at that point.
I don't believe that the meetings were every single week, were they? I saw that there were 14 meetings.
Well, they were at one point every other week. Sorry, every other week.
You spoke very eloquently last week, Kristina, about holding each other accountable.
Right. And I just said that I had, you can try to throw me under the bus on this, but I just said that I had remembered having a conversation with Brenda and saying that I was doing the best that I could and would somebody else like to go. And her advisement was, go to what you can, keep doing what you can. The project is already going through. So, work with Rhonda, and that is what we did. And I feel good about the work that we did. So I'm happy to take that feedback from you, but at the end of the day, I feel good about my involvement in this project and trustee Sitnik's.
Okay, so I think, Brenda, you're leading this part of the meeting, but I think we've accomplished what we wanted to. Thank you, Jeff.
And thank you. We do appreciate the opportunity. And like I said, and I think some of you've pointed to it, the group was really an outstanding group, and we thank you for selecting them and allowing us to work with them. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you, Jeff.
I'm not, sorry, I was muted. Yeah, thank you, Jeff, but I was muted. Next, we have our dress code policy, and we're being asked to extend that. And I'm assuming that Melissa will help guide us through that conversation.
Actually, I think this is a board to determine if you're going to extend it for the next year. If I'm accurate, that's what the policy says, and that's where our pre-discussion was around that as a circumstance.
Thanks, Michelle. I'll jump in, and Kristina, if you want to add anything. But you know, when we had this discussion last year, we sort of got to a place, we put a lot of the decisions around the dress code in the hands of the principals and said local decisions, but we did say we wanted to revisit it. We put in a sort of an end of this year timeline, so that's why it's coming back up again, and we do have to readdress it. However, Kristina and I were in agreement and wanted to bring it to the board that now is not an appropriate time to have what is clearly a divided topic. Our staff is certainly in different places, and if we wanted to move on the policy, we would want to do it in a manner that is inclusive, and also at a time when people aren't already experiencing a lot of extra anxiety. So it will be our recommendation to adopt this policy language that pushes the decision back to next summer, and then put it back on the docket for this time next year.
I think that sounds like a great idea. I think it's not really a top of the line priority right now. I think we have a lot of other things we need to handle.
So if no one else has any other comments, then we'll just pass this policy, which keeps everything exactly the same as it was this past school year, and we'll revisit it again next spring.
All right, that sounds good. Next, we have suspension of board policies related to Wisconsin Act 185.
That one I will talk about.
Okay,
That's all
Melissa.
Melissa.
I figured you would talk about that.
That one I will talk about. The legislature and governor signed Act 185, which was a number of pieces of legislation related to the current health crisis. And there were a number of pieces that affect public schools. Among those things that affect public schools, the legislature changed the dates for open enrollment for the process for when applications are due, when school districts can act on those applications, when applicants can be notified of their acceptance or denial. So we have a policy that, of course, has adopted the statutory dates. And so we need to request that you just amend the policy to reflect the statutory dates for the upcoming 2020-2021 school year. And then in addition to that, as you know, the district has an analogous procedure in the district for students to request to attend a school other than their home attendance area school. And we refer to that as the interdistrict transfer process, or IDT. And those dates are also, we've already done the preference window, and then we have a secondary window that those dates are aligned to the open enrollment dates. So we are asking, for sake of clarity and for the process, that we align those dates in the policy just for the 2020-2021 school year to the dates that the legislature has enacted for open enrollment. And then the last request is to amend the policy related to the charter schools and their enrollment process. Again, that process is aligned to the open enrollment dates and the open enrollment process. So we're asking if the board could also align the dates in that policy to the revised dates in Act 185. And then I just want to, Ellen Krieger did the bulk of the work on this, and she put together those exhibits so that you can see how the dates are going to change in all the policies. So I want to publicly thank her for all of her hard work on this, because as you can imagine, every time the legislature or the federal government comes out with some new legislation or a code change, it has increased our workload tenfold. And with a department of 3 working remotely on top of the day-to-day stuff that's still coming in. Open records requests haven't stopped. Contracts have definitely not stopped. We are swimming right now. So I just really want to thank my team, because without them, we wouldn't even be afloat right now.
Melissa, I have one question. I know that there's a window after the first window closed for priority for intra-district transfers. Then there's a window that opens up for people to apply that missed that deadline but are still considered intra-district transfer, and then they get lumped in with the people from out of the district. Will that shift? Will those people automatically go into the priority group now that this date has changed, or do they have to do something?
Yep, the priority date has closed. It closed before the closure. So we've already acted on those applications. What we're asking is for the date really just to be extended for that secondary window for the IDT. Okay. And so they will have just as long to apply for IDT as our families for open enrollment. And we think that's important because we have families living in crisis right now, and I don't think they're thinking about where their kids are going to go to school next year if they're looking at making a change of their attendance area school. So not only will it ease the confusion about the dates aligning, but it will give our families some extra time to think about whether they would like their child to attend a school that's not their attendance area school.
Okay, thanks. So any other questions on this? Otherwise, we'll move that forward to a vote in 2 weeks.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I want to thank Melissa and your team. I got to tell you, when you look at the magnitude, it's 3 pages of whereases, which tell you how many different statute changes there have been and what the authorizations are and what kind of orders they keep changing and changing and changing. And this is just one example of the different pieces brought forward. And I know, and also to the board, I mean, there's a lot of changes that are going on, and we just received word again that there could be some rule changes again around licensing and so forth. So we can anticipate many more things coming forward as a result of the COVID-19 as well. So just putting that out there, and thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Melissa and Ellen and Heather. All right, that concludes the teaching and learning report.
All right, thank you, Brenda. That moves us on to the organizational support work session, and that will be facilitated by Kristina.
Sorry, everybody, hold on one second. My computer froze. So I'm just pulling it up. Okay, so the first thing we have is business and finance discussion items, and that's the 2020-21 school fees. So who is
that would be me, Kristina, Pete. Yep.
Thanks.
So if you could open the document up that you have included, it's the 2021 fee schedule draft. This should be pretty simple going forward. I think it's a decade now that the district has gone forward without increasing any school fees, and this year would be another year where we would not increase or recommend to not increase fees. In addition to the fact that we wouldn't increase the fees, also any child that qualifies for free lunch, all these fees are waived with the exception of those that are asterisked. I also sent a memo for you as well so you could see what the collection of fees have been for the past 3 years. If there's any questions, I'm ready to answer any questions that you might have.
Pete, I have a question. Just wanted to clarify that right now we're in pretty uncertain times. There's no guarantee that we're going to start school right away. Understand some of these fees might be collected regardless, but we would have the ability to come back and modify this if there's new information regarding school start in the fall.
Without question, this recommendation would be based on school starting in person in the fall, and should that not happen, these obviously will be taken up by the board and adjusted as appropriate. You bet.
Thanks.
I have a question, or I guess coming from the public. Is there ever any way to have some transparency around what the fees are used for? If the monies are collected and then the money is used for X, Y, and Z, is there ever any way to be able to allot for that?
Some fees would be general revenue, and there would be no way to make a direct relationship with respect to those fees that come in and what specific items are purchased. There would be some fees with respect to other items like, well, let's see, family activity pass for events. Typically, those fees do help fund the activities of the district. But again, it's not, if a dollar comes in, you can't tie it directly to a dollar going out. Just like when a tax dollar comes in, it's very difficult to tie it directly to a specific expenditure.
Would there ever be any way to just even note that in general? Any way to document it?
Yeah, geez, without a mammoth accounting feat to be able to account for the $600,000 or so worth of fees that go to the various programs, that would be quite a feat to tie every one of those.
Yeah, not specifically, but just in general, that when people are paying fees, that there's some sort of, even just what you said, that it goes to the general fund, or just some sort of itemization.
Right. I would say that it would go to the general fund then. If you want to take a look at what it costs for the district to provide supplies for an elementary school classroom, it's certainly more than what fees are collected, if that's what you're driving at. I'm not sure exactly what your question is.
Well, and it's not my question, it's the question coming from the public, and they just wanted to know what that looked like and how that works, and if there was ever a way to allot for it, but it sounds like there isn't.
For the amount of money, again, in the district, the size of the budget that we have, these fees would be collected as we would collect other general receipts and taxes and state aid, and go to pay for the services that we have that serve our children.
Thank you.
Couple of things. I have some questions that were I was asked to ask about at the meeting. So it appears that a lot of times, at least at certain buildings, parents are asked to pay the school fees during open house. Now, does that put people in a position of having to self-report if they are waived from these fees, or is that known before someone would even be asked? How does that work?
That's a really good question, Andrew. I don't know the answer to that. I can certainly get it for you, because if you are a student who would be on a national free lunch program, those fees are waived. I'll get an answer for you on that, because we wouldn't want to have that self-reported.
Okay, and then I think there are some thoughts of whether this if this is another way of taxing parents or raising additional revenue. And then there was I guess, could we just get a little brief background on, the Wisconsin Constitution says schools shall be free and without charge for tuition, but districts are allowed to charge. I don't know if the word is nominal, but there is a small amount of fees that a district is allowed to charge. Could you just cover that a little bit?
Yeah, I would say that the fees that the Green Bay School District charges are pretty insignificant compared to the instruction. when I take a look at fees that other school districts, maybe even neighboring school districts, charge for their instructional programs, Green Bay is at the low end of the scale. You could be lower, I suppose, if you wanted, or you could be higher if you wanted, but I don't think they're out of line. In fact, you know, the $40, $45, or $50 for the general fee is pretty consistent as being on the lower side of what typically schools would charge for fees.
Okay, and also one thing ours does include, because of a compromise I think that I helped put together years ago, is the idea that we don't have per activity fees, and I think we may have slightly, many years ago, increased the general fees, but not by much though, to kind of make the statement that when you come to Green Bay, a general fee is inclusive of your activity fees, and it also would make it automatically waivable. Also, too, I was asked about the parking pass. Why are we charging for student parking? Is it just to raise, you know, if the answer is that it's just to raise more revenue, or if it's to raise more revenue and also to try to encourage sharing or discourage parking? I guess just some questions about why a parking fee for students, and why 75 and not something else?
I will get answers for you, Andrew, for the next meeting when this would be up for approval. I do not know the answers to the student parking permit fee and what the reasoning was behind establishing it.
And it's quite possible that it was just the board decided over the years. I don't think it was always 75. Could be wrong, but you know, it could just be that the board decided it was appropriate in some amount of fees for a service. I know there was discussion about should it be reduced or waived if a student is traveling between schools for classes, because we want to incentivize that rather than disincentivize driving your car a short distance to park, or maybe that's not part of it at all. So I was asked to bring up those items, so I think I covered those questions, and look forward to some of those answers. That'll be for next.
And Andrew, I'll bring some history with respect to that too, because it's actually kind of counterintuitive when you think about it, because you might want to have fees a lot higher than that in terms of being able to make a carbon-free footprint and discourage driving. I don't know if that was the goal of the 75.
And I'm not saying that that's where I'm at, but and I think there might have been. I think it was more the counterpoint of, okay, maybe it's good to have. I know there was some discussion, but it didn't end up making the final decision. Didn't reflect it, but there was some discussion about, do we want to have the fee be lower if students are traveling for classes?
Okay, I just want to chime in here real quick. The parking lots have a great deal of cost than the $75 that we would charge per student. I would think that we could, if we wanted to save money, let's get rid of all student parking. We don't have to plow them, we don't have to maintain them, and well, you know, I don't think that the student fees cover that. So while Pete may not be able to, from an accounting standpoint, say that every dollar that comes in a parking fee goes directly to pay for the fuel that plows the parking lot, I guarantee you that we're not making money off of maintaining student parking lots. So, Pete, I'm sure that'll come across in your research, but that seems to be how I would explain that.
Many years ago, now when I was doing my administrative work in Milwaukee, we studied a neighboring school down in the southern part of the state that was charging a lot more than $75 for their parking. And we did an analysis, and they charged based upon proximity to the front door. And you'd be surprised how many kids paid a lot of money so they could be right by the front door.
Sometimes they're monitored too.
Yes.
So there's monitors in the parking lots too, for safety reasons.
But can I just say something really quick though? I think with all this, it's really a good conversation. And Pete, I know what you're saying. It's sort of insignificant within the larger totality of our budget. But the truth of the matter is, and we all know this, right, that these fees are a burden to many of our families, especially families that have multiple kids. I mean, every year when I have to pay my 2 kids fees, and we have additional fees because of the schools that they go to, right, because that changes. So I think, you know, any way that we can communicate to families more clearly what they're paying for, and also how they can opt out and not feel, you know, guilty about it, it is really important for our community and the families that we serve, because we want them to come into the school year feeling really good, not that they should feel bad that they can't cover the costs for whatever the reason may be, especially during these times of economic uncertainty.
Yeah. And I think, Pete, as we talk about it, maybe we should talk about it, leadership learning, because I've been to a lot of open houses and they all look different. So some of them, everything's lined up and people just go through the lines and pick their things up, and you just go through. And at one point we were wanting everybody to at least consider filling out, you know, or at least looking at we offered it to everybody, the free and reduced forms, because we were losing so many people that really qualified, and it's like, well, take a look at it, you know, and no judgment. So I think it's really important to just make sure that how it looks and feels. We want to make sure how people feel if they are not in a spot that they, yeah. So
Michelle, to your point, can I ask you a quick question about that? Our schools that have universal free, if they're that CEP school, so they don't collect, do we then waive the fees for all of those, or do those families still have to fill out the free and reduced to get the fees waived?
We need the forms for the federal government, but that doesn't, and that's where we get our ratios and title and that kind of thing. That's what we need it for. I would assume for us, it's really to get the resources through title, is my understanding.
Okay.
Obviously the fees would go with it, but yeah.
Okay.
I also make a point, and I think I made this when we were discussing the CEP schools, and we were talking about families who are actually on the lower end of the income bracket, and their fees are being waived. There are always the people on the other side of who qualifies, and sometimes that's the trickiest place to be. And that's something I hope that we consider when we talk about, we've never raised the fees, and I'm grateful for that, but the people that are on the other side of who qualifies for CEP, who qualifies for free and reduced lunch, those are the people that are, I think, hit the hardest. And moving forward with an impending recession, that's something that I want us to talk about. That never gets enough airtime as far as I'm concerned.
And I think it's important, Michelle, you pointed out to us in our meeting on Wednesday that the district has never once sent anything to collections. They've never once beaten down the door to go and try to collect this money. If somebody doesn't pay, they don't pay.
And I'm thankful for that as well, Eric, but I think the average person doesn't know that. And so it still is a stressor for them to know that it's out there and it's looming, whether they know, because I don't know if we're probably not letting people know that directly. That's just something that you probably find out the hard way or not. So just to be mindful of what those people might be going through.
Anything else on this topic? Okay. Great. There wasn't anything under human resources discussion items. So the last item is setting future agendas. So anyone have anything to add? No? All right, Eric, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right, thank you. That wraps up our meeting. I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, thanks everybody. That's the rest of the meeting.
Bye, everybody. Thanks.
All right.
You have been watching the Green Bay Area Public School District's Board of Education meeting. Please visit the school district's website, www.gbaps.org, to view the program again. If you cannot fully access the information on this video, please let us know the accessibility issue you are having by calling 920-448-2025 or by email at communications@gbaps.org. We will try to provide the information to you in an alternative format and/or make the necessary improvements to make the information accessible.